All right, so let me explain this because this is something that has been asked of me quite a lot. Whether I'm doing a live stream, whether I'm doing a any kind of video that I do, this question always pops for some reason. It's regarding the Apple TV 4K, and it's regarding the match content that's available on the video settings on the Apple TV 4K. Now, first, before I start talking about the match content and how that started, first let me take you back in time. Let me take you back to 2017. Okay, after Apple launched successfully, Apple TV 4K was a big success in 2017, spring, I believe, or summer, and people started buying it, and it was a pretty successful launch of Apple TV 4K, and people loved it. People enjoyed it. They loved the fact that they can buy affordable 4K HDR Dolby Vision movies, especially for those who are heavily invested on Apple ecosystem. So they were very happy to have this device. There was one that's 32 gigabytes, the other one 64 gigabytes. So people love their Apple TV 4K, right? However, there was a slightly minor complaint that some home theater enthusiasts and individuals who are heavily invested on iTunes ecosystem, there was a complaint where, remember, this is before we had the match content. Okay, now we have the match content, 2018, 2019, we have this available. I'm talking about prior to this. Okay, I'm talking about 2017, early 2017, when it was officially released. This option was not available. The only option you had was this, to select HDR. You have to select HDR or Dolby Vision depending on what television you have. So when you turn the HDR on, when you select the HDR and you turn it on, majority of home theater enthusiasts and people who have 4K HDR televisions who are heavily invested on iTunes ecosystem, they didn't realize that the HDR was running all the time, regardless of whether you're watching 1080p or 720p. That HDR was always being forced. They didn't realize that. They didn't realize it till they start noticing something's wrong. You know, like the colors would be off a bit on certain movies, and certain content will look a bit strange with the colors, and they would say, what's going on here? And then when they would turn on their, even right now you'll see HDR running. When they would turn on their source to see what it's displaying, the HDR would always be displaying. Like you can see it right now. It's always displaying. It's always on. So what's going on right now, the Apple TV, it's constantly forcing that high dynamic range onto your television. So, for example, let's say I wanted to go and watch a Terminator. The Terminator, it's not a HDR movie. It's not encoded to HDR. It's not even 4K. It's just a 1080p. It's just a 1080p upscale to 4K. This movie doesn't have HDR, but right now, currently, it's being forced with HDR, and it looks a bit orangey. It looks a bit strange, you know. And even I notice it, you know, to some degree. And if you click on the source, you will see that the HDR, it's always running. There it is. Even though this movie, it's not in HDR, there's no tone mapping to have HDR. So therefore, the HDR, it's being forced. And this was the complaint that people had on 2017 when they first released the Apple TV 4K. People didn't realize that the HDR was always being forced. The reason I'm telling you It's so that way you connect the dots and understand why this update was implemented. So let's go back to this update called the match content. All right. Due to the complaints that majority of Apple TV 4K owners had, the Apple TV had found a solution to fix this problem simply by giving them an option to automatically select the HDR when it's being present. Whether it's HDR, whether it's Dolby Vision, the match content, which is on video and audio over here, automatically it's going to, when you turn it on, automatically is going to select and display the content without any alteration, okay? And that's the whole idea. When you are forcing an HDR, there's going to be alteration. The color's going to be a bit off. That Arnold's going to look a bit orange. You know, certain things are going to look a bit off. You're not going to be watching the movie the way it was meant to be, you know. The black digital level is going to be too dark or vice versa. Okay, so this is the reason why in, I believe, early 2018, the match content update was implemented due to the fact that people were complaining about this. All right, and this is the reason why I'm telling you that you need to turn and switch from 4K HDR to the SDR. Okay, there's no reason for you to keep that HDR on. Because here's what happens. When you leave this HDR on and you select match content on and frame content on, it's going to be a bottleneck for your user interface, okay? For your user interface is going to be a bottleneck. Your user interface is going to be a bit sluggish. It's not going to respond very quickly. That's the main reason why they don't want you to have the HDR be enabled on the user interface. You don't need the HDR on the user interface. That's why I select 4K SDR. So that way you can avoid the bottleneck. When you are using the user interface, you can have a much smoother, better performance experience with that A5 chip that they have built inside. So, another thing I'm going to talk about, chroma. All right, this is something that really is, there's no point of view forcing the 444 chroma. Just leave it the way it is in 420 because automatically the HDMI is going to select. If you have a high-speed HDMI connected to your Apple TV 4K and your TV, that HDMI chipset inside the Apple TV 4K, it's going to automatically detect that you have a high-speed cable, and when you are watching an HDR movie or a Dolby Vision movie, it's going to automatically go and chroma sample that 420 to 444. It's going to switch to 444 because you have a much higher bandwidth cable that can take more bandwidth of information between your device and your TV. That's really what it is. It's information that's being sent from your Apple TV 4K device to your TV. So you don't need to force, guys. There's no reason for you to force this to 444. Leave it the way it is. The only thing you have to do is this. Don't enable HDR. Leave it alone. Listen, leave it alone. The reason Apple TV 4K gave you this match content option, it's so that way you don't have to worry about turning your HDR, turning off your Dolby Vision, turning on your Dolby Vision, so you don't have to worry about this hassle. This is the hassle-free. This will do it automatically for you. Think of it like a chip, computer chip, that automatically is going to detect whether you got Dolby Atmos, whether you got Dolby Vision, whether you got Dolby HDR10. Automatically is going to detect. Leave this on. It's going to give you the best possible frame. and it's going to be the best possible dynamic range, whether it's standard or whether it's the HDR. And this is the reason why you have this update. I mean, if this is not being clear enough, then I don't know what is. Okay. Now, these LED lights that I have put on my television, it's just my own personal preference. I like it that way, and that's about it. You know, I don't know what else do you want me to tell you. I just like it that way. All right, that's my personal preference. And if it bothers you, then don't watch the video. You know. But on this video, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you guys some information, so that way you understand why the match content it's there. And this goes for you too, Luke. Listen, you don't need to enable that HDR. Leave that HDR to 4K SDR. There's a reason why you have this. There's a reason why this is available. What this basically is, Luke, it's for you to automatically detect. You don't have to worry about it. Think of this. They made this for the dummies. They made this for individuals who are not tech savvy, and they don't have to worry about it. It does it for you automatically. Doesn't matter if it's an HDR, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, doesn't matter. This will automatically detect. If your TV supports it and your device supports it, it will be decoded. That's why this exists. And the reason I told you about 2017, this is the main reason why they implemented this update, because people were complaining. Because they didn't like the fact that they have to go to the settings every single time. They have to go to the settings and they have to turn off and on the HDR in order for them to watch standard dynamic range movies or content. Okay? Do your own homework, guys. Everything I tell you here, do your own homework and you will see. Now, who told me to do this? Well, I used to go to Apple Store all the time. I used to buy the Belkin UHD cables. I met a bunch of technicians from Apple who were there. They also knew I was doing a YouTube channel. So I asked them some questions. I asked them some questions about the Apple TV 4K, about the A chip that's built inside, some questions. And I also asked them about the settings, because they were installing something, and there was this one guy who was a technician there from the Apple. And I asked him some questions like, man, what do you recommend? Because I told him that I had my HDR always on. And he goes like, you shouldn't be doing that because you're forcing that HDR onto your user interface, and you're forcing that HDR onto your standard 1080p HD movies that are on there. You shouldn't be doing that. And he told me there's this new update that gives you the match content availability where you can switch it on, leave it on, turn it on, and it will automatically detect whether you have the HDR or whether you have the Dolby Vision or what have you. It's automatically going to detect what format it's best to be viewed on your television. And he gave me that information. Then I went home and I updated my Apple TV 4K. I did a couple of videos on it. And then just so happens that Vincent Tio as well, what a coincidence, even he did a video after I spoke to this guy. And I believe he still has that video with these exact same settings. Okay? So remember, guys, forget about the chroma. Leave it like this. It's always going to be at 420 when you idle, when you're here on the user interface. It's going to switch by itself when it needs to be, automatically, depending on the content that you're watching. You don't have to force it. And you shouldn't force it. Everything should be left automatically. And what's so great about this is you don't have to do anything, guys. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is two things. They really made this so easy. They made this for regular Joes and regular Marys. It's what they did. Because a lot of people now, they have 4K TVs, HDR, and Dolby Visions, and this is a new thing for them. They don't know. Okay, they didn't make this for high-tech gurus who understand what chroma sampling is, who understand all the technical jargon that comes with it. They made this very simple. This device will do everything for you. It will detect exactly what your television is capable of, what HDR format it can support. Therefore, use the match content and leave it on. Leave the dynamic range on and leave the match frame on. It even says right there at the bottom, it will play film content in its original frame rate. Some televisions do this automatically. Well, guess what? Boom. Apple TV 4K does it automatically for you. Boom. Everything's being done for you here. When you have these two turned on, you don't have to worry about anything. You want to watch an HDR movie? Well, guess what? Let's go watch the Terminator. Guess what? It's going to be in a standard dynamic range with 1080p. Here we go. Boom. And you will see it. And it even loads up faster. And there it is. And it looks now much better. It doesn't look oranges like it was before when I was forcing it. Well, guess what? You're not going to see HDR. You're just going to see UHD because it's being upscaled to 4K. Okay, so let's switch to... let's go switch to the other movie that I have over here. Let's go switch to Transformers: The Last Night, when you will see the HDR. It's going to show up. It's going to pop. There it is, and you're going to see it. Here we go. There it is. So everything is done for you. You don't have to worry about anything. That's the beauty about the match content. It automatically will adjust your picture and the frame and the HDR format that it supports, that your TV supports. Okay? Hopefully you guys were paying attention in these 20 minutes or whatever. Because I don't know, this is like my 7th video. I think it's my 8th video. My 8th video so far that I did. Number 8 that I did on this. And people are still being confused. I mean, what's the confusion? Seriously, guys, let's boil this down to basic steps. What's the confusion? No confusion. Very simple. When you buy your Apple TV 4K and your 4K TV that has Dolby Vision and HDR, first thing you need to do, go to the settings, click on video and audio, and just scroll down here. Leave the match dynamic range on and match the frame rate on. That's it. Don't enable the HDR, leave it off. The only format you should touch is 4K SDR. So that's it. 3 simple steps. Leave your format in 4K SDR at 60 Hertz. And come down here and turn these two on. Match content, dynamic range on, and match frame rate on. Simple 3 steps. This is really not that difficult. And once you do that, that's it. You're good to go. That's it. Mission accomplished. I explained to you what the reason is behind this match content on update. And I told you in the beginning, when they released this device, because I was the first adopter, people were having problems. Because they noticed that the HDR was always on. They noticed that it was running always all the time. That was before we had this update. Now with this update, it's perfect. And there's a reason why you want to leave it like this and turn the match content on and turn the frame rate match on as well. I hope that this video was clear and that it was not confusing. I really tried to explain this in the best possible way. I'm not gonna do any more videos about this. This is my 8th video. Guys, type in my name, it's all there. This video explains everything clearly, explains everything from beginning to the end. Okay? Don't worry about the chroma 444. Don't force it. It's stupid to force it. It's going to do it automatically if you have a high-speed, ultra-high-speed cable. All of the high-speed cable HDMIs can and will support 444 automatically when it needs to be. Okay? So, everything I say here, you guys can do your own research. Go online and do your own homework. Do your own homework. You don't have to take this for the face value. You can do your own homework. But I'm telling you, this is the best way for you to enjoy Apple TV 4K on your 4K television. Have a good one, though, and take care.